Christmas had always smelled like cinnamon and pine to me. Even now, as I stood on my son Daniel's front porch, with a neatly wrapped pie warming my palms through the foil, that familiar scent drifted through the cracks of the door and pulled me backward through time. I could almost hear Daniel as a little boy, laughing too loudly, shaking presents before he was allowed to open them, asking questions I didn't always have answers to, but tried my best to anyway. I rang the bell, smoothing my coat, my heart already full. The door opened, and there he was, my son. Taller than I remembered, broader in the shoulders, with faint lines at the corners of his eyes that hadn't been there when he left for college. For a moment I forgot everything else. "Mom," he said, smiling, "you made it," as if there had ever been another option. I hugged him tightly, breathing him in the way only a mother does, as though some part of him still belonged to me, stitched into my bones from the day I first held him. He hugged back, but not as long as I did, not quite as tightly. I told myself not to notice. The house was beautiful. Too beautiful, maybe. Every surface gleamed. Garland wound perfectly around the banister. Stockings hung in precise symmetry. Candles flickered without a single drip of wax out of place. It didn't feel lived in. It felt staged, like a photograph meant to convince the world that everything inside was perfect. His wife, Emily, appeared from the dining room, wiping her hands on a towel that didn't seem to need it. "Merry Christmas," she said, her smile polite, her eyes flicking briefly to the pie in my hands. "I brought pecan," I said quickly. "Daniel always loved it." "Yes," she replied, "of course." Something in her tone made my smile falter, just a fraction. Daniel took the pie from me and placed it on the counter without comment. I told myself again not to notice. Dinner was nice, that was the word for it, nice but careful. The conversation stayed light, weather, work, the rising cost of groceries. Laughter appeared on cue, but never lingered. I watched Daniel as he spoke, the way he avoided certain topics, the way his eyes flicked toward Emily before answering even the smallest question. I wondered when that had started. As we sat at the table, surrounded by food and decorations and everything that was supposed to mean joy, a strange heaviness settled in my chest. At first, I thought it was just emotion. Christmas did that to me, brought back memories of my late husband, of years when Daniel was little, and the world felt simpler. But then the warmth crept upward, sharp and sudden. My stomach tightened, my head began to spin. I pressed my napkin to my lips, willing the feeling away. I didn't want to be a burden. I hadn't wanted to come here fragile or aging or anything less than the mother Daniel remembered. "Mom," he asked, "are you okay?" "I'm fine," I said too quickly, just a bit warm. Emily's eyes lingered on me for a second longer than necessary. I took a breath, then another. The room felt smaller. The lights seemed too bright. My heart thudded oddly, not fast, not slow, just wrong. "I think I'll get some water," I said, pushing my chair back. "Excuse me." Daniel stood halfway, then sat back down. "You know where it is." Of course I did. As I walked toward the kitchen, my hand brushed the wall for balance. I told myself it was nothing, just fatigue, just age, just too much rich food and too many memories. I had no idea that with every step I took, I was moving closer to a truth I was never meant to see. And that Christmas, this Christmas, would be the last time I ever felt safe in my son's home. The kitchen lights were brighter than the dining room, almost hush, and the sudden change made my head swim. I paused just inside the doorway, one hand gripping the edge of the counter, until the world steadied enough for me to move again. "Just water," I whispered to myself, "that's all." The sink was only a few steps away, but each one felt heavier than the last, like my body was quietly rebelling against me. My stomach churned, and a cold sweat broke out along my spine. I reached for a glass, my fingers trembling so badly it clinked against the cabinet. That was when I heard voices, low, urgent, coming from the other side of the kitchen, near the pantry where the shadows gathered thicker than they should have. Emily spoke first. "I told you not to do it today," she hissed. "Of all days, Daniel. Christmas. My heart skipped. I froze, the glass still empty in my hand. She wasn't supposed to eat that much, Daniel replied. My son's voice, my child's voice, sounded strained, irritated. Not concerned, it was only meant to make her uncomfortable, enough to convince her she shouldn't be living alone anymore. I felt the room tilt. What if something happens? Emily whispered. Daniel scoffed. Relax, I measured it. It's not enough to kill her, not enough. The word echoed in my ears, louder than the pounding of my heart. My knees weakened, and I had to lean fully against the counter to stay upright. For a moment I thought I might be sick right there on the spotless tile floor. What if she figures it out? Emily asked. She won't, he said. She never does. Mom always trusts me. A sharp, invisible pain sliced straight through my chest. They were talking about me. I followed the sound, each step silent, my body moving on instinct, while my mind screamed for this to be a misunderstanding. I peered around the corner of the pantry wall, my breath caught somewhere between hope and terror. Daniel stood with his back to me, holding a small bottle in his hand, clear liquid, no label. Emily stood facing him, her arms crossed tightly, her face pale. You said this would be easy, she said. That she'd agree to sign everything once she thought she was sick. She will, Daniel replied. She's scared, she already looks it. Once the doctor says it's stress or age or whatever, I'll suggest we manage her finances for her. Her house, her accounts. It's better this way. Better. My son, my baby, was planning my future like a transaction. The glass slipped from my hand and shattered against the floor. They both turned. For a split second, no one spoke. The Christmas music playing faintly from the living room felt obscene, cheerful bells clashing violently with the truth now hanging between us. Mom, Daniel said, his face draining of color. How long have you been standing there? I couldn't answer. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. My heart raced wildly now, each beat loud and painful, my vision blurring at the edges. Emily took a step back. She heard us. I slid down against the cabinet, my legs finally giving out. The world felt far away, muffled, like I was sinking underwater. You made me sick. I whispered, my voice barely audible. On purpose. Daniel moved toward me. Mom, listen. This isn't what you think. Don't touch me, I said, suddenly finding my voice, though it shook violently. Don't you dare. My hand fumbled in my pocket, my fingers clumsy as I pulled out my phone. I didn't look at either of them as I pressed the screen, barely able to see through the tears. 911, the operator's voice came through, calm and steady, a lifeline in the chaos. My name is Margaret, I said, forcing the words out, even as my body trembled. I think I've been poisoned. I'm at my son's house. Please, please send help. Emily gasped. Daniel swore under his breath. Outside, somewhere far away, a siren began to wail, and for the first time since the night I brought my son home from the hospital, I was afraid of him. The sound of the sirens grew louder with every second, cutting through the forced calm of the house like a blade. Red and blue lights flashed through the windows, washing over the Christmas decorations and turning them into something unreal, almost mocking. Daniel paced the kitchen, running a hand through his hair. Mom, please, he said, his voice low and desperate. You didn't understand what you heard. I stayed on the floor, my back pressed against the cabinet, my arms wrapped tightly around myself. My body still felt weak, my stomach unsettled, but the pain in my chest, the emotional kind, was worse than anything physical. I understood enough, I said quietly, enough to know you betrayed me. Emily stood near the doorway, her face pale, her mouth opening and closing as if she wanted to speak, but didn't know how. She wouldn't look at me. The front door burst open moments later. Heavy footsteps, calm, authoritative voices. Ma'am, we're here to help. 2 paramedics knelt in front of me, their presence grounding, real. One of them asked me questions. My name, my age, how I felt. I answered as best I could, though my eyes never left Daniel. The dining room filled with people relatives who had come for Christmas now whispering in confusion. Shock rippling across their faces as they tried to understand why an ambulance had arrived in the middle of dinner "What's going on?" Daniel's uncle asked. "Why are the police here?" "Because the police were here too." An officer stepped into the kitchen, his eyes sharp, observant. We received a call about a possible poisoning. The word hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Daniel laughed nervously. "That's ridiculous. My mother just felt unwell. She's older. It happens." The officer turned to me gently. "Ma'am, can you tell me what you experienced?" I swallowed hard. My throat burned. Every instinct in me screamed to protect my son, to soften the truth, to make excuses the way I always had. But something inside me, something long overdue, refused. I overheard them. I said, my voice shaking but clear. In the kitchen, they talked about adding something to my food, to make me think I was sick, to scare me into giving up control of my life. Gasps echoed from the doorway. Emily broke down first. "I didn't want it to go this far," she cried. "I told him not today. I told him." Daniel turned on her. "Stop talking." The officer raised a hand. "Sir, that's enough." I looked at my son, then really looked at him, and for the first time I didn't see the boy I raised. I saw a stranger wearing his face. Why? I asked softly. After everything, why? His shoulders sagged. The anger drained from his face, replaced by something ugly and small. "We needed the money," he muttered. "Your house is worth a lot, and you're alone. I thought it made sense. It made sense." Tears streamed down my face, silent and unstoppable. "I trusted you," I said. "I trusted you with my heart, with my life." The paramedic helped me to my feet, wrapping a blanket around my shoulders. The warmth felt foreign, undeserved somehow, but I clung to it. "Ma'am," the officer said gently, "we'll need to take statements, and we'll be collecting any substances in the kitchen." Emily sobbed openly now. Daniel didn't move. He just stood there as the house filled with consequences, questions, murmurs, the quiet click of handcuffs being prepared. As they led me toward the ambulance, I paused at the front door. The Christmas tree glowed softly in the corner of the living room, untouched, beautiful, and unbearably sad. I turned back once. Daniel met my eyes, his filled with regret far too late. "I loved you," I said. "I still do, but I will never protect you from the truth again." Then I stepped outside into the cold night air, the door closing behind me, and with it the illusion of the family I thought I had. I spent Christmas night in a hospital bed, listening to the quiet hum of machines instead of carols, staring at a ceiling far too white to hold any memories. The doctors said I was lucky. Whatever had been added to my food hadn't caused permanent damage. Uncomfortable, yes. Dangerous, potentially. Fatal only if no one had intervened. I had intervened. That realization settled into me slowly, like warmth returning to cold hands. The days that followed were heavy but clear. Statements were taken. Tests were run. The bottle Daniel had held in his hand was no longer invisible. It had a name now, a purpose, a paper trail. Truth, once exposed, had a way of multiplying. Daniel tried to call. I didn't answer. Emily sent messages, long ones, apologetic ones filled with explanations and blame that shifted with every paragraph. I read none of them past the first line. I wasn't angry in the way people expect betrayal to look like. There were no screaming fits, no dramatic speeches, no thirst for destruction. What I felt was something quieter and far more powerful. Clarity. I met with a lawyer a week later, my hands steady as I signed documents that protected what was mine. My home, my savings, my independence. For the first time, I understood that love did not require surrender. The investigation moved forward without my interference. I didn't need revenge served loud or bloody. Justice was patient. It showed up in court dates and official letters. It showed up in the way Daniel lost access to my accounts, my property, my future. He lost something else too. The story spread quietly through the family, not as gossip, but as truth. Invitations stopped coming. Trust evaporated. The image he had worked so hard to maintain cracked beyond repair. And I survived. Spring came, and with it, a lightness I hadn't felt in years. I repainted my living room. I joined a book club. I learned slowly how to exist without apologizing for taking up space. When Christmas returned, I didn't go back to that house. Instead, I hosted dinner at my own table, surrounded by people who had chosen me. Not for what I owned, not for what I could give, but for who I was. The tree was imperfect. The food was too much. The laughter was real. As I raised my glass that night, I felt something I hadn't expected. Peace, sweet revenge, I learned, isn't about watching someone fall. It's about standing tall when they tried to push you down. It's about surviving what was meant to break you, and building a life so full that betrayal no longer defines it. And for the first time in a very long while, Christmas smelled like cinnamon and pine again.